just as those words take us to the Far East, I want to ask us all a question about the wild, wild West. What if the wild, wild West really wasn't so wild? According to the book, The Not So Wild, Wild West, the wild, wild West was quite orderly. You know, there may have only been 8 to 12 bank robberies during the whole heyday of the wild, wild West. And unlike what we might be tempted to believe from Hollywood movies, the pioneers in the West established laws, created order, and agreed on property rights. These property rights took the form in branding cattle to prevent theft and limiting the number of cattle to avoid overgrazing. One famous example is with Teddy Roosevelt. He bought a ranch in 1884, and when he bought the ranch, he announced he was going to run twice the number of cattle on that ranch. Well, when the neighboring ranchers heard about this, 2 of them came over, they showed up at his home, approaching the future president of the United States, and they said, "Teddy, when you bought that ranch, you knew you could only have 600 cattle because that's how many fit on that property." And he replied, "Well, I guess those are the rules that we live by." Those are the rules that we live by. That's the order that can happen when community works together. The neighboring ranchers had fears and concerns about overgrazing, and Teddy Roosevelt was able to understand this. The fact that there are conflicts, that doesn't surprise me. Yet, the fact that we can reconcile and figure out those conflicts, that sometimes I find way more surprising. And you might be surprised to know that this is the major story in this week's Torah portion, because we find a similar conflict in Matot Masai, which is the very end of the book of Numbers. And here we read about a tribal conflict over livestock. The children of Israel are about to enter the land of Israel, and after a 40-year journey through the desert, they're about to enter, and each of the 12 tribes has been allotted. They've been given a portion of the land of Israel. But surprisingly, the descendants of Reuben and Gad had an abundance of livestock. And they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, and behold, the place was a place for livestock. They said to Moses, "If it pleases you, let this land be given to your servants as a heritage. Do not take us across the Jordan River into the land of Israel." Reading these verses, I'm shocked. How could it be that these 2 tribes could have the chutzpah, could forsake a promise made to their ancestors, Abraham and Sarah, over 600 years ago, a promise to live and dwell in the land of Israel? Of course, Moses responds with the most Jewish and rabbinical way possible. He answers with another question. As a matter of fact, he answers with 2 questions. First, he has to address his first concern, which is that they're shirking their responsibility. So he says to them, "Shall your brothers go to war and you stay here?" And then he asks a second question, dealing with the psychological effect that their actions may have on others. Why do you discourage others from entering into the land? Moses is not being passive-aggressive. He's doing the opposite. He's clearly communicating his fears, his worries, and his concerns. But then the real miracle happens. The most remarkable thing happens because these 2 tribes take a step towards Moses. They approach him. They move towards the conversation. And the words are, "Vayikshu elav v'yomru." They approached him, either literally or figuratively. They take a step closer to Moses. They reassure Moses that they will not abandon their fellow Israelites. First, they will help the nation enter the land of Israel, and only then settle their ranch on the other side of the Jordan River. They ask Moses to trust them by showing Moses that they are indeed trustworthy. It is this lesson of trust that we learn from these last pages of the book of Numbers. It is this lesson of trust we learn right before the Israelites enter into the land of Israel. It's this lesson of trust that focuses on trusting those closest to us, our siblings and our close friends. Remember, these are the same 12 tribes who are named after Jacob's children, those brothers who sold Joseph into slavery, and it took years, if not decades, for them to reconcile. But the most important part of the story is that they did. They were able to reconcile. They were able to make peace. They were able to figure things out. They were able to create law and order. I wish I could say that these were ancient problems, that modern technology has somehow solved this. I wish I could say that I'm not heartbroken every time I hear about siblings that no longer speak, brothers that do not trust one another, sisters that might talk every once in a while but deep down kind of resent one another. I wish I didn't sigh every time I hear about friends who parted ways. Even if you are lucky to have wonderful and nourishing relationships with close family and friends, I'm sure for most of us, you do not have to look too far, because this lack of brotherly love is way, way too common. Sibling rivalry may be natural, Rabbi Sachs writes, but it is not inevitable. It can be conquered. It can be conquered. Maybe that is why for 3 weeks each year, from the 17th of Tammuz to the 9th of Av, our sages want us to refrain from sinat chinam, this unwarranted hate. Right now, we are in the middle of this 3-week period, and we will observe the 9th of Av in 11 days on Tuesday, August 1st, here at Temple at 7 p.m. Each day during this time, we try to let go of this unwarranted hate, the sinat chinam, especially vis-a-vis those who are closest to us. Many have adopted the custom to go out of their way to increase acts of kindness, gimilut chasadim. And this year, the synagogues and Jewish institutions here in Memphis are involved in a secret Santa. So you're involved in this, to demonstrate the respect and trust we have in one another. We, a few days ago, sent a secret surprise, I'm not going to tell you where we sent it, to another organization on behalf of all of us here at Temple. And just this morning, a basket of oranges and Tropicana orange juice was delivered here at the Temple by our secret buddy, with a note saying, "Orange you glad, it is Shabbat." And wishing all of us a Shabbat Shalom. So thank you. Soon we will learn which organization or synagogue has stepped forward, approached us with a desire to increase the love, respect, and goodwill that makes our Memphis Jewish community such a blessing. The tribes that approached Moses in our Torah portion, they model for us one way to resolve conflict and to nurture healthy relationships. For some of us, that might come very easy. For some of us, that might be kind of hard. It might be a huge step or just a little step forward. We may feel like no one else is playing by the rules, and we may feel like we are that lone pioneer in the wild, wild west. We may argue that conflict is natural, even unavoidable. And maybe we can try to tap into some of this Jewish wisdom for living wisely. It is only for a few days at the end of each summer to take that step forward, to let go of some of that hate and resentment, to reconcile, to create peace and goodwill, and let us say, Shabbat Shalom.